Well, so glad to have you back for the second day of the conference. I think yesterday was magnificent yesterday, and I think it will be today. This has been a really good conference from the start, I think, to the finish. So thank you all for coming out so early this morning. I am glad to welcome you back here to UNC Asheville's campus. I am going to welcome Kimberly Hunter to the microphone, and she is going to introduce this morning's panel. Thank you.
What a privilege it is to be here this morning, and my name is Kimberly Hunter. My day job is I work at Mountain BizWorks as a cooperative developer and the entrepreneurship program manager. My life work extends, as with many of you in the room, well beyond my day work. And so this morning, I have the honor and privilege of first thanking Dr. Waters and really developing and being the catalyst for this conference each year, as well as our UNCA family for giving us a framework for how to progress in our region with not just academic knowledge, but history and combining the relevance of today and moving our ecosystem forward. And so my privilege this morning is to moderate this panel with a group of people that I adore. You're going to hear me say things that are probably a little bit personal as well as professional because that's how I live my life, right? So I want to actually call up some folks that will be on the panel. Yvette Singleton with Everyday Details and also a member of APIPA. Please welcome everybody. Kathy Avery with Everyday Details and APIPA. Jennifer Poor with Everyday Details and APIPA. And my road dog, Ace Coon, Anthony Thomas with Upstaff. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge two more people. One is already in the room and the other is on the way. Jane Hatley, who has been a big part of our cooperative development component with Everyday Details of self-help. And last but definitely not least is Joanna Greer-McKeechin, Executive Director of APIPA and a member of Everyday Details. Yes, in traffic, people running. So let's begin. Okay, so our session this morning is talking about long-tail ecosystems. And for some of you may know what I mean when I put this panel together in the topic, and some may not know. And I just want to give a brief explanation of what we're talking about this morning. So a long-tail ecosystem in business language means that you're not getting to market necessarily fast like everyone else. There is a very deliberate, successive train, a funnel that actually delivers value and delivers business based on a lot of factors that are relevant to keeping a community whole. And so this particular panel is very important. I want to recognize that Joanna just walked in the room. She won't be speaking with us today, but I do want to acknowledge she's a very intricate part of this conversation. So the long-tail ecosystem is important because in the history of African Americans in Appalachia, developing businesses and social enterprises and nonprofits that are relevant to our region means that it's taken oftentimes more time. And in our business and our society and our region, a lot of people think that slow means incapable. They also define long tail or a long process meaning not together. And we're here this morning to really dispel and get under the hood and behind the veil to demonstrate very proactively why long-tail systems are in the bedrock of not just African American communities, but many communities of color and tribal communities and such. So we really want to honor and elevate the need for long-tail systems and how they themselves are extremely profitable beyond traditional return on investment, but for the health and viability of people in a region. And so my first question is just to ask each member to give a little bit of background of how they got to where they are in their co-op or their social enterprise. Yeah, and I'm gonna go back over there, maybe easier.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Thomas, and I am the General Manager of Upstaff Personnel. Upstaff Personnel is a social enterprise that was birthed out of a local nonprofit that most of you may have heard of, which is Green Opportunities. It's a temp-to-perm staffing agency that we incorporated to work with particular demographics that Green Opportunities has historically worked with, getting them into organizations that obtain sustainable employment and getting placed into jobs that are career track. So we are working with the City of Asheville, we're working with Mission Health, we're also working with some of the local hotels here as well.
Great, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Poor, and I work with AVIPA. That's where I first got my start as a volunteer and then as a contract worker. Meeting the needs of the people in the community when we go out, door to door, boots on the ground, doing health assessments and education. We saw other things that a lot of people needed, so coming up with everyday details through the co-op, through AVIPA. And it's been such a joy to be able to do this. And it's more educational for me because I've never been a part of a co-op. So I've learned a great deal and still learning. And that's how I got my start in everyday detail is through AVIPA.
Hi, my name is Kathy Avery. I am the nurse for AVIPA, and we do preventative health care. And one of the features that is most exciting about AVIPA is our door-to-door method of working with our community, because we know that a lot of times when people go to the doctor or are out in the community, you can only see one facet of their life. But when you go to their home, you really see whatever is there. And if you build trust with people, then you also can hear what they really need. So during this process, we decided as we were going out as a team that a lot of people we saw needed help, and through the system as it's set up now, sometimes it took too long to get that help. And we wanted to, as passionate, hardworking people, we decided that that's not the way we wanted to do things. AVIPA doesn't do things like that, and so everyday details came from that, and it was like, okay, what can we do now? What can we put together now to help our community? And then the second thing was, who are the people that's gonna give this help? So we started out with us, because we wanted everybody to we decided the first thing that we wanted a working wage for our employees as we go out to find people to bring into our group. But the main thing is, can we pay a living wage? Start there. And then can we address all the problems that we saw in the community? That was number 2. And so from that, we decided to start really slow and to build it up, but at the same time, we were already going out as a AVIPA, and so we wanted to make sure that we were also serving the community as we go along.
They really summed it all up. However, my start with the AVIPA also was through volunteering with them, and as we were in the community, we discovered these environmental issues. So the co-op was a entity we came up with as a team to address those issues. And that about sums it up.
So my first question is off the script. What would you say, and anyone can answer this question, has been vital to staying in pace with the needs of community?
I feel like it's vital to continue to be in the community as well as being a part of the community, to stay connected to the community members that live there, to build relationships with them, to gain their trust so that they will feel safe with inviting us in and allowing us to assist them in whatever way they need assisted.
I'd like to just piggyback off of the word trust. Ms. Avery used the word trust, and you all use the trust as well. I think trust is really big. I think it's a bridge, and it goes both ways. I think when you're working with what I would coin majority organizations or majority communities here in Asheville, and you're working with the community that we work with, that trust goes both ways. And so building that trust with the community members that we work with, knowing that we have their best interests at heart, and then also educating some of the other folks who don't typically deal with that community, and building that trust there, I think is what makes things really successful.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, who wants to speak to an equal voice? You know, when I observe, like, working with each of you and how you not just live your lives, but how you serve in the business or in your nonprofit organization, you're not the only one talking, right? So there's space that you often leave for listening. How much is that? How much space do you leave for listening when you're building something together in a community?
Well, as a nurse, one of the things I learned is you spend a lot of your time listening. You go in with a plan. Nurses like really love plans. And you go in with a plan and you come out with another plan. Because you go in saying, I'm going in to do X, Y, Z, and then when you sit down and talk to the person, maybe for an hour and a half, you find out that they could care less about what you came there for. But they are very interested if you sound like you, sound and look like you care. They're very thorough in telling you what it's been like for them, what they really want at that moment, and you have to address that. So you have to be willing to listen, give the time to listen, and be able to back up off of what you came there for, as the song says, to do what they want. And then keep in the back of your mind that the ultimate goal is your plan.
Anyone else?
Well, I feel like that it is probably pointless to try to go into a home with a script. You can't be scripted. They have to see that you are genuine, and you have to leave room for listening. That's the only way that they will begin to trust you and know that you care. And then you can give that feedback and offer the assistance that you came to offer.
And for me, in the work that I've done, at least at Green Opportunities, a lot of it boils down to vulnerability and leaving that space for the participants that we work with to allow themselves to feel vulnerable and be able to share. You know, it takes a little while to dig below some of the hardened exteriors and those layers of what folks are really going through. And so through that trust and then allowing the space to allow them to feel vulnerable and share with you, I think is really, really important. For the work that I do through employment, giving that space is actually really helpful, because when I go and I do site visits, and now that I've built that trust and I've allowed them to be a little bit vulnerable, that has allowed me to also help that employer grow, because they will share with me some of the dynamics that are going on with that employer that they typically may not have said anything about. Maybe they just do no calls, no shows, and they just don't want to rock the boat. They feel safe enough to tell me, well, this is what I'm experiencing with this employer, which gives me what I need to go in there and assist that employer in terms of how they're treating their employees and maybe help them on their bottom line. So allowing that space to, for them to share with you is really important.
And then too, once you get in and once you actually listen and see what the issues are that they have, when you actually execute the first thing that they needed done, then they're like, oh, they got me a food box. So that means they're actually here for me. So, then that opens up that door where the trust come in and everything, where you can be able to go to the plan that you originally wanted to do once you're in.
Thanks. I wanted to lay the foundation with like principles before we get into like the engine of a business. So I'd like to transition to questions. One more off script, and then we'll get to the ones that are on the page. Several of you, and that includes folks in the audience, owned businesses and ran companies prior to choosing to lead social enterprises or become a cooperative worker owner. What has been your process and why have you evolved from single owner leadership in a business model to collective leadership or shared leadership and ownership?
Okay, I'll take that one. We kind of do, all things together. So, I own a rental property, but I also am a contracted nurse for WNC, and so I still do all those things. And so generally, one thing leads to another, and you bring all things into the room. So when we thought about the co-op, we know that, as I said before, we wanna make sure that people have a living wage. We see what we do in the community, and the needs are so great that we decided to come together, because we were already together, we were already doing the work, and thought, what platform, what business model would help us to do what we need to do? And then when we got to talking to Kimberly, who we adore, and Jane from self-help, we saw this opportunity, and they told us about it, and we go, that's exactly what we're talking about, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we brought them into the family, because we're a family. So we brought them into the family so that, because we're smart. So Joanna is like the management guru. And so we're all have our pieces, but bringing everybody together and everybody talking about their piece and how we wanted the co-op to look. We brought them together because we're also smart. So if you have self-help and you have Mountain Bizworks, look what you got. Right at the beginning. So if you need some education and some training, you call Q. If you need some help with business model and structure and all of that, you call Jane. And then if you needed someone to put this together so we can get a paycheck, you call Shawana. And if you needed people to get out there and work, because that's what we love to do, you call us. So when you put us all together, you got it. You got everything, all our talents, and we bring all those talents into the room, and we make sure that we use every single talent that everybody has. And if you don't have the talent, or if you don't have that piece, we go out and find someone that does.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That's great. Anybody else?
So upstaff is really in its infancy stage. The hope is that eventually we will look at the cooperative model. Right now, for us, we're located in downtown Asheville, and one of the perks that we think that brings to a lot of the folks that we work with, a lot of times, folk that look like me or look like the demographic that we work with don't find themselves downtown, down on the block, which is historically an African American area. So we're excited to be down there. But the other piece I think that brings is, wow, here's a majority Black organization working downtown. It's a business that's working for us. To me, I feel like that gives folks incentives that things can be done in Asheville. I originally came to Asheville working at this very place, and the admissions officer as assistant director of admissions, and I was specifically working on attracting students of color to Asheville. And as I traveled around the state and mentioned Asheville, Black folk was like, I am not going up there, But for the students that I ended up bringing here, for me, it was like they had someone here that was there to support them. And as I went to the different high schools, whether it be Asheville High or somewhere else across the state, I wanted them to know that college was an option for them when they never thought that college would be an option. And it's the same for me as far as business. So I've taken every business course, I've taken every business resource. I was at Mountain Bizworks when Mountain Bizworks wasn't Mountain Bizworks. And I want other folks to know that those resources are available. So as folks come in to our staffing agency, it's not just about them getting that job. Yesterday I was at Biltmore Farms and I was talking to a student about how they can buy a house. If they keep this job, they get put on permanently, they start earning a decent income, and together they can go see self-help and see how they can get a first-time buyer. And sitting down with them and trying to work out what does that timeline look like. So there's all these different things of just letting them know that things are possible. And they just need, that support and to see folks that are already doing it.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you both said because I think that's what this conference is about and why we were asked to provide a panel on business owners, because it's about taking the invisible and making visible. And as single owner businesses or corporations or LLCs, you can oftentimes become even more invisible as an African American person because you're just working on expanding your business. But what I really appreciate about what you all piggybacked upon each other and said is, that's one approach and there's nothing wrong with that. The approach we have found over time is actually taking the experience, identifying the gifts and the talents and the resources and the expertise of individuals, bringing those together collectively, and then expanding our work together based on our own individual niches together. And so we're finding this isn't new, this is actually historic. You know, when you look over whether it's 1500, you look at 1830 or 1890, you look at 1920, you look at all these different eras, this is not new. But because we go through series and seasons in our, unfortunately, in our society where visibility is something to be fought for by different people groups, and actually it's just kind of one of those entitlements as a human to be seen, as a neighbor for me to see you, right? As a man, a black man to be seen, as a black woman to be seen. And so bringing more visibility in the ecosystem of building long-tail businesses is part of what is working. But long-term, these businesses didn't start yesterday. If you listen to the story so far, they've been 10, 15 years in the making. And that's not slow. That's actually a lot of wisdom in that. And so we move to our next question, which is, how have you created enterprises that actually serve both the owners, and in some cases, and I think in both cases, the owners are the social or the nonprofits that have incubated you, the worker owners, and the community? How do you do all three equally? Kathy, I know you have an answer for that. I saw it.
Well, the word equally kind of threw me off, because what we've learned is to keep that balanced term in your head, knowing that it's probably 90% of the time it's not going to be balanced. So you're trying to juggle so many things and keep it all balanced so that something doesn't get lost in the mix. And number one, you got to know that's impossible. And then you got to be able to slow down, stop, back up, replan, re-discuss. You know, you had this plan, and the plan didn't work. And you can't get upset about that. You just got to come back as a group, sit down and talk about, okay, why did that not work? And what about this one is falling short because of this one? And then you got to be able to adjust. And maybe you have to figure out how to give more time to one for a while so that you can bring the other one up. And so it takes, if it's a co-op, everybody has a say. Everybody has things they need to do. Everybody has a weakness. Everybody has things you need to learn. So you have to be able to slow it down, bring everybody together if you want to be a co-op. You can't leave people behind. So that's basically it, because if you don't keep that in place, and that's a co-op, that's any business. If you really want a business to be successful, even if it's just employees and you have that hierarchical structure that we all used to, if you don't think about the people at the bottom, at the middle, and at the top in that structure, it's gonna fail. Or somebody's gonna be left out, somebody's gonna be unhappy. But at least with a co-op, you go into it, at least with the mindset that we all equal. We all have talents. We all have something to contribute. And you just keep it slow enough to make sure that it all happens. And then you remind yourself of that every day. Because you might forget. And Tawana has her hand up, so she's gonna yell out something, and I'm gonna, yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, that thing. Because we started out with the working wage of $12.15, and then we decided, then we started thinking about That looked good when we started, but then we had to raise it up to $15 because, when we started looking at 1099 and the tax people, cause you know they come and they want their piece. Well, you're not paying that if you don't put into the market the amount for the taxes. And so we had to go skid around real quick and go back and say, okay, that's not gonna work. So we had to adjust for that to the $15. And I think nationally, it's $10 to $15 is what everybody now is trying to pay their workers. But we're going in the door as a small, teeny tiny organization, trying to make sure that that's in place right from the start.
Balance. I'm not so sure that exists. It depends on the day. There are some days that I walk out of the office and I was like, it was a good day. And then I get in the morning, it's like, this is a crappy day. It's hard, but I think it's necessary. For me, how I do it is I look at like what my long-term goal is. The way I've always looked at this agency is kind of going in and kind of being that voice and that face for the folks that I work with. I think right now is I've done this work a long time when I worked at Green Opportunities, and the market is very different now than it was when we initially started what we coined the labor crew before we started the staffing agency. And back then, it was, there wasn't a whole lot of balance. We didn't have a whole lot of leverage. I didn't have the leverage to hold employers accountable for doing what they said that they were gonna do, and they would say that they were committed to our mission and working with the folks that we work with, but they didn't treat them that way. And I didn't have a whole lot of leverage for that, because they were like, if your employee didn't work out, then there's plenty of people out there that come and take that job. But right now I feel fortunate because the market is so tight that I have a little bit more balance to be able to hold employers accountable. Oh, you wanna treat them like that? Well, I got another employer over here that needs employees as well, and I'll take them over there. You need to be treating them a little bit better. And so I think the universe has given me the ability to have a little bit more balance, to be able to work with employers, to work with their internal systems about how you should be treating employees, and how you should be looking at maybe paying people a little bit more. If you have a housekeeper and you're only paying them $9 an hour, of course they're not going to stay. Not in this market, not when the other hotel is offering them $12. And it's like, so what you going to do? You know what I mean? And so that allows me to keep that balance and advocate for the folks that are coming through our program.
Yeah, I think that's great. Sorry I'm too loud, but I was gonna say, between the two of you, there's a couple things that we wanna elevate. Is one, with the social enterprise, whether it be Upstaff or the cooperative of Everyday Details, and there are several more, in a traditional business, which I've had several myself, oftentimes the return on investment is just in profit, right? We're talking about return on investment being what the market wants, and they're the primary focus. In the social enterprises and the cooperatives, actually the focus and the emphasis is on the people first. And that is not a fast to market kind of merchandising, you can package it in a box kind of way. And it also allows, to your point in the leverage, the more visible we make collectively this notion of the people are important and not just the return on investment in the market, then their leverage does happen. But that was a 9-year process, correct? It didn't happen yesterday. And same thing with Everyday Details. ABIPA bore the brunt, Asheville Buncombe Institute for Parity Achievement, bore the brunt through having volunteers do the work until there was enough leverage in the market to actually create an enterprise that would benefit the workers. So African Americans in this region, whether they're running their own enterprises, co-ops, or social enterprises, aren't slow, aren't behind the scenes. We just often put people first because in any other situation, they're not. Did you want to add anything?
No, I think you summed that up.
So what are the hurdles that your team and business have been able to overcome with great integrity because you've taken time to invest in process? Outcomes are important, we all know that. I think everybody in this room, up here at least, has come from some form of nonprofit. So outcomes are always, in front of us. But there's process that sometimes outweighs the outcomes. And why? Why? Let's elevate that. Let's make that visible to the people in the room.
For upstaff, I think, process has been, really important just from a sustainability point. I have a magnificent board that kind of keeps me in check. I tend to be an emotional business owner sometimes, and I have a fabulous board that just kind of sits me down and says, have you thought about this, this, and this, and this? And it's really hard when you're in the thick of it, because this is not easy work. This is not easy work at all by any stretch of imagination. I'm sure these ladies can tell you. We love our customers, we love our clients, but they're not angels either, and they don't make it that easy either. And so having those hard conversations, and so trying to work with them there, and then also try to change some of the dynamics of the employers that I'm working with at the same time, you can kind of get caught up in the mix. And so you really do need that process for long-term sustainability, otherwise you'll burn out. So for me, it's kind of a slow roll.
For us as well. Because one of the things we know from Avila and my lifetime nursing is that you gotta have a strong structure. And it doesn't matter how long it takes to do that. Well, it does matter if you need to eat. So you have to be able to balance, but you gotta have all the things in place too. The legal things that a lot of people, you don't have the education around that. And I think that happens a lot with small enterprises, that people don't take the time to learn the legal part because you want to get right to the job. You want to get right to what you're passionate about. And you have to slow yourself down enough to know that if you don't have your legal process in place, if you don't learn each step of the way the other business, that every business has to do, if you don't have that in place, then if you don't do it at the beginning, it's gonna catch you in the end. So you have to slow down enough to get that taken care of. And then everybody has to be in the same place with that. And a lot of people have different knowledge, and you've got to bring everybody up. You can't say because, one person may have all the legal knowledge and the business knowledge, but because some people wanna be, just let me get the job done. Well, no, this is a co-op. So you have to know the legal and all the ramifications going forward, and that makes things slow, very slow.
Because it's equal knowledge, it's
Because
shared
it's
knowledge
shared
for
knowledge.
financials, for legal, for running the company. It's not a top-down model, so everybody has to understand
Exactly.
those components.
And that's another good reason why we have Mount Visitors and Jay from Self Help, because we've already got them embedded in the process. So that way we can have meetings and have trainings to bring everybody up, even as we go out to do the jobs, because we so passionate, you don't want to lose your passion. So you're gonna go out and keep working, and then everybody has to be passionate, and I'm gonna say that about our team.
Yeah.
Without the passion, it's never gonna work. You learn all the professional stuff you want, but if you don't have the heart to go in and do things that nobody else wants to do, or maybe even nobody else even knows about, it's even needed. If we didn't have the passion for the job, when the obstacles come up and we want to not agree or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, okay, the passion is there, we're gonna do this because we love each other and we're a team. So while we learning and still working, that's the passion for what we're doing is what gets us through each day to know that we're gonna get to the other end because we have that going for us.
That's great. Thank you. Beth, do you wanna share the?
Well, I will share. So it's so great when you can come together as a team and debrief and bring up issues job is gonna be as you get a little further down the road with that person, they tend to wanna throw other things in the mix. And so it's very important that you are very, upfront and transparent with them about those details. So, yeah, I had a client and, he called me and he said, could you please take my vacuum to the shop, it's broken. And I said, sure, no problem, I can do that. However, when we came together as a team and we discussed that, they were like, we're gonna have to readjust that and let him know that that's gonna be a service charge. Because we need to remember that the clients that we can't pay who can't pay are gonna be supported by those clients who can pay. So that was very important, even though I felt like, it's just a vacuum, but the time that it takes for me to go get that vacuum, take it and drop it off, get the details for him, take those details back to him, negotiate whatever needs to be negotiated, and then when it all panned out, he needed a new vacuum cleaner. It was no good. So anyway, it's a really, really interesting process. I've never owned a business, so it's all new to me. I'm learning, and because they say I'm so compassionate and gullible, they have to reel me back in and help me to focus on the business aspect of what we do in our co-op. So.
And it was a combination of the business knowledge, like we actually ran the numbers of what it would cost to actually provide that service as a team, as well as the team priorities of worker owners first, that actually shifted the conversation with the client. But when you're running a traditional business, oftentimes the market is dictating every step of what you do. And social enterprises, which we're again elevating here because so many African American founded nonprofits are incubating social enterprises in our regions and co-ops. It's really important to elevate not just the cultural aspects of it, but the principal aspects of why time is really tied to people and the whole person, as well as what the market needs. It is not separate. And we're not here to preach and teach the market should be different. The market is the market. But what we do want to do is elevate that people pay for things, products, services, for companies they care about. And if you care about the people, your neighbor, and those neighbors are doing great work for people in your neighborhood, then their process and their expenditures are something you want to think about investing in. Okay, my next question is, how many layers of relationships and industries are you managing to build within your enterprise, and why? We could probably spend the remaining portion of our conversation just around this, but.
Could you repeat the question?
How many layers of industries are necessary to actually building your enterprise sustainably? And what we're alluding to is the visibility around the effort, not just vendor relationships and processes, but actually human relationships that actually create the sustaining bubble around your business.
I wouldn't necessarily say with upstaff that we have layers, but I think it's almost like this, it's an ecosystem basically of different relationships that I've had to build in order to wrap that love and support around the folks that I work with, right? So we're talking about relationships that we have with Mountain BizWorks around finances and business planning and those types of things, and that's to help the business be sustainable. But it's also my approach when with working with vendors is starting at the top and then working my way down. So getting buy-in from the very top person at any one vendor that I might be working with and working my way down. And so I might be talking with the VP but all of my daily interaction might be with a manager or a supervisor that's on the floor, as well as some of the other employees that might be working with the employee that I placed there. And then with some of the folks who come through our programs, it's working with any other program or nonprofit that they might be working with. So, you know, it really is beneficial for us if someone was referred to us from a BIPA, because I know a BIPA has been giving that person support, so then we can also do our piece and provide that support. And so there's some more love wrapped around the folks that we work with. And so it's not so much layers for me as it is kind of like this, it's an ecosystem for me in terms of different folks that I work with in the community to make it work.
Yeah, that's a great transition to Kathy, because I think you wanted everybody to understand what we're talking about in terms of ecosystems.
Exactly. So, you know, when you talk about ecosystems in the business model, you are talking about all the people and businesses and everything wrapped into one big thing. And so when we talk about our model, you first have to talk about a BIPA, because that's how we get out to find, to do door-to-door assessments and to find some of the clients that have needed way more than we had the money or the skills or the time to take care of. But that didn't mean we were gonna walk away. So that meant that we needed to come up with this co-op. So Everyday Details is a co-op that can handle errands, transportation. So then in transportation, we have someone that we have that's as part of our team who can go out and take some of our people to the grocery store or to the doctor or whatever it is we find that they need. Some may be paying, and a lot of them can't pay, so we have vouchers for that. So we are doing a pilot in one of the apartment complexes in town because we found a lot of need from another layer, Mission Health Partners. So they refer a lot of high-risk clients to us, and what we noticed was a whole list of them was in the same place, and that we were going to one place a lot.
Hey Kathy, can you define high-risk clients? I think that would be interesting.
That means that not only, they look at it as high utilization to the emergency room, high hospitalization, which means when you look at that, then you're talking about people's health issues, and they have a lot of comorbidities. That means they have more than one thing wrong with them, and so they gotta go to the emergency room a lot. And you know how hospitals hate that. So then they call us. And then sometimes they say people are not compliant, or, you know, the utilization, that they can't get them to answer their phones, usually because they don't have any minutes on their phones, or that they,
Or maybe they lost it under a pile of
water materials. And one time, let me just one quick thing. One time on one of our first adventures, right before the co-op, which really made us decide on the co-op, is we literally were asked to go to a place to find the patient's phone. And when we walked in, that was really a major undertaking to find their phone. And so we did. But, so that was another layer, so.
Can I just add, like, I love what you're saying here, so I want you to slow down a second, because we know that, I know the back end, Jane knows the back end, we all know the back end, but the people in the audience don't know the back end. Why is a hospital giving you a referral to find a phone?
Well, it was an elderly person with a lot of health issues, a lot. And so they kept calling and calling and calling, and there was no answer on the phone. But since we do the door-to-door method, which really, I'm pretty much gonna say we started that method in the intensity and the way it's done here in Nashville. So they knew about us, so they said that they were really trying to get in touch with this elderly lady who was very, very sick with a walker, confined to the home, all of that, and blind and diabetic, and the list went on.
And needed to age in place, and this is one of the social determinants of health, to actually get her to age in place, right?
And some people don't need to age in place, but if they're out there and we're trying to help them do that, there's gotta be a whole system in place, which is another reason for the co-op. And so so we did find her phone, and a ceiling high, a room high, everything under God's green earth. And so it's a long story, but, so I won't tell you about the whole thing, but we did find the phone. But with the pilot program that we were doing that came from that, we also had, communications with the service coordinator there, who had, since we had that long list of people that also lived in that complex. So we decided that that would be a good place to do a pilot, to just get to know those people that were on that list as high utilizers, and also the service coordinator, bring her into our team. And she was happy to be there, and so a lot of times she would just call me and say, help. And when she was having situations with different people, and she would just call and say, help, and I said, okay, I'm turning around, I'm on my way. So it's knowing that there are people who care besides us,
Yes.
and bringing those into our team, and making sure that we incorporate their needs and what they can bring to the table as we grow this outward, so that everybody, even you guys, are now part of the team, because you're understanding what's happening, what's going on in your neighborhood, that someone is trying to address. So when you see our name, everyday details, or a BIPA, or something going on, you go, hey, they talked to us about that, let's find out what's going on so we can come help. You're the layer. Everybody is a layer in what we're doing, because as we work our way out to solve this problem, the more people we bring in at the end, then your whole neighborhood has been grown and improved, because someone was willing to take the time and the love and the attention to address the situation.
Well, that's the personal part I wanted to get to. And we'll get to a couple of questions in the room and go back to the conversation. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. The visibility piece of having this conversation about social enterprises and cooperatives that are run and owned by African Americans is critical to this conference because of what you said, Kathy, that lots of people throw around words that are totally chic in business or in the community, like social determinants of health, like, like employment for African Americans in this census tract or that census tract. And on the ground, what you're saying and what you're hearing in the marketing and what actually is happening on the ground is completely a whole different model for how people are addressing it. And so people want money and resources for social determinants of health, but IFIPA's been addressing social determinants of health before it was a term for 11, 12 years. Doing the work, people trusting them in their homes to help them solve day-to-day issues that nobody else cares about, nobody else sees. And in many cases, they didn't have a dime to actually pay somebody to do. And so I remember when we were incubating the co-op, and Kathy or Juan or anybody who wants to ask, Yvette or Jennifer, people are saying, well, how are they gonna make money, right? Because the fast-paced business world says, you gotta be first to market, you gotta be this, you gotta be that. But oftentimes in African American communities, or at least African American owned businesses, that are born out of service to community, it's not about fast to market. It's about what have we already seen, what are we already doing, who do we already know, and if it means skipping over them to get to market, we're not gonna do it, right? Because that's what you're saying.
That's right.
It is at the, where our motto at the end of the day is, did the individual get their needs met? And will they be able to function a lot better than they did before we came? And so that's our goal as a team.
And the business models are there. That's the exciting part. It's not like they're not there. We just attended, Jane and I, a conference for our industry in Chicago last week. And I was only there one day, and I happened to have lunch with somebody who runs one of the most prominent home care cooperatives in the United States. I just happened to be at that table. And he and I got to talking. It's called Evergreen. And he and I got to talking, and he said, well, what's their business model? I was explaining how excited I was about about our work, their work really. I just get to tag along. Thank you for letting me tag along. And I explained the business model, and he was like, whoa, nobody's doing it like that. So it's not that the intelligence, the business thought process isn't there. It's this, no, we're not leaving anybody out. We're not gonna leave that census tract out. We're not gonna leave that economic layer out. We're not gonna leave that age group out. We're not gonna leave that group out, right? That's the visibility piece. So I want to take a few questions from the audience, and then we're going to go back to some of our questions, but this isn't a monologue. So anybody have any particular questions about these businesses? Yes?
I have two questions. I think this is very exciting, what you all are doing, and I'm thrilled to hear it. I'm wondering two things. One is, what is the relationship between the ABIPA, the nonprofit, 501c3, depending on contributions, and the co-op? What's the relationship between the two? And then also the funding, you mentioned the funding from the clients, but I'm wondering if you also get some funding from like Mission Health for helping them not have so many people come to their ER. So those two questions.
Okay, so we do have a lot of layers, as Kimberly was talking about. So we do have a contract with Mission Health Partners, kind of changed, so we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. But yeah, we have a contract with Mission Health Partners, so they can send us those high-risk clients. And then we have a grant from the county, the Isaac Coleman grant, that's basically driving this everyday details operation right now. But we know that grants come and grants go. So which is why we're using the co-op model, and we're building it slow, because thank God we can because of this grant. So we can actually not leave anyone behind. But we have to have paying customers, which we're working on, so we have to get all our legal and structure that way first, so that we can go out and get those paying customers. But thank God we can do what our passion has told us to do by working with the people that we call having vouchers, because we use the Isaac Coleman grant to pay for those people with the needs that set us on this journey to begin with. And we can work with them now to make sure that we can take care of their needs while we're trying to get the media and all the coverage for the part that's paying customers when we get all our business and legal and all that done. So we can just hopefully jump on out there and people will just start bringing the phones off the hook. So that's what we're doing right now. So those layers are there, and we've gotten funding from different sources to help us get this started. We can do what we need to do to hopefully hopeful. So we will be sustainable. And so that's what we're looking at now. So I'm glad that we had this opportunity today to come and just let you know from the very basic when we're starting, where we are and where we're headed.
Really exciting.
So I'd like to invite Joanna German-Keachin to the mic. She'd like to add a little bit to that answer.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. You know, it's very hard for me to say, I just want to let them shine, but this is just one more piece I just want to say. What's interesting as well is in the development of everyday details is that we recently got our LLC. Please give us a hand. And what's interesting about that model is that ABIPA is also going to be a part of the worker owner. And so it's a very different model, but again, in the sustainability of ABIPA, we wanted to make sure that ABIPA was embedded and it benefited from the work that we've been doing, but then also it has a seat at the table. So that no matter if Joanna or Kathy or whoever else has gone on or transitioned, it will always be something that will make sure that ABIPA can continue to do the work that Dr. Blair envisioned almost 15 years ago. And so it's a different model, and so we have had, because of the Isaac Coleman grant, which we just can't thank the county enough for giving us the flexibility to understand that we've come up against some different obstacles. Because originally, this was supposed to be a healthcare co-op. However, it could not be a healthcare co-op because when we went to a conference last year, all the way in Virginia, we found out that there was a moratorium in North Carolina on starting healthcare co-ops. So exactly. So we had to shuffle to see what we could actually still do legally. Again, it goes back to those layers and lessons learned as you go down the highway of business. But being able to recalibrate because you have access to self-help and to Mountain BizWorks, were able to connect us to a lawyer who is a specialist in co-op development that allowed us to keep going. Because just because we hit hurdles, that doesn't mean that the work stops. And just because we hit hurdles, people's needs don't stop. And so it has been a passion of ABIPA to ensure that whether we have funding or not, we will still supply services. But for us to do that, we need to embed something that would give us the opportunity to do that, and this was the perfect opportunity. That's all I have to say.
Okay, great to hear from you. Thank you. I want to also, yes.
Might we hear the same answer about the relationship of green opportunities to the staffing
Absolutely.
agency?
Yes, take it away.
So, Upstaff originally was a mechanism that we had within Green Opportunities when we were very early on, where we would have folks going through our long-term training, and that was an unpaid training. And so we knew that folks needed money in their pocket for whatever they needed to pay for their personal needs. And so what we would do is we would leverage local small businesses who maybe needed an extra hand for a certain period of time, to get those students working with some of these small businesses. And what we realized after looking over the course of about 3 or 4 years, we would charge like $1 over so we could cover workers' comp, or we would cover our general liability and administrative costs, but it wasn't anything that we had even considered as being a business. It was just a particular piece within our training. After looking at the numbers over the course of 4 years of doing that, it actually was the most profitable thing that we had ever done in Green Opportunities in terms of generating revenue for the organization. So then what we did is we went to Mountain BizWorks and we went through their Scale Up program, which helped us further confirm that. And then we had to decide what was this structure going to look like. And what we decided to do is to incorporate Upstaff. And so Upstaff is actually a C Corp that is wholly owned by Green Opportunities. And the reason that we decided to do that is that staffing can be fairly lucrative, and what we didn't want to happen was that we were generating more revenue for, well, let me back up. So Upstaff was created where we would still take folks who were going through Green Opportunities training and funnel them in through Ready to Work, which is that Green Opportunities, and put them into positions, which would be related income from the IRS standpoint. What we quickly realized is that we would probably be generating more revenue from folks who didn't actually come through our training, who may be walking through our doors, and going into positions which could compromise Green Opportunities 501c3 status. And so we decided to go with the C Corp. And so it's a for-profit entity separate from Green Opportunities, but Green Opportunities wholly owns the subsidiary.
And you are an employee
I'm the general manager of Upstaff,
Staff.
which is the C Corp.
which is the C Corp, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before, yes?
I want to commend all of you on your hard work through the years, and I'm sure your clients and customers have really benefited from all of your hard work. For the piece where you have to go into the home and assist, as a funding source, I've heard about a grant from the county. Have you all utilized any funding sources from the state? Because I know the state has an independent living program that I was just thinking about could maybe be helpful to help pay for some of the things that a person may need in the home, or pay for staff to go into the home. Have y'all ever partnered with the state on that?
Well, this is that slow movement. Because of us learning of the moratorium and the terminology that we have to use for the everyday details until July of 2019, when the moratorium is over,
Hopefully.
Well, it's supposed to be over, but that doesn't mean that you don't know what's gonna happen after the moratorium time is up. So they may decide that they're not gonna have any more, we don't know. So we have to stay very, strategic in what we do as, everyday details with errands, transportation, and light housework that doesn't ever, I think one time, it actually turned out light. Heavy duty housework, so we just have to be very careful. So our funding sources at this time, because of the way we have to do that, is limited, I would say.
I just want, could I just add something? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to add one important piece to upstaff and being incorporated in that, and speaking back to your question, is that profits from the social enterprise also funnels back to green opportunities to support the training programs that they put on as well.
Very key point, yes.
You said that you had to be careful with the terminology. What exactly kind of co-op, what's the terminology you're using? Since there's a moratorium on.
So it's everyday details, people helping people. And what we do is we're very specific on what we are going to do. So cleaning, errands, transportation is our three top things now, which means you can grow over time and add more things as the moratorium is over. Maybe we get a license and we can do that. So it's a great dance because of HIPAA. I am licensed as a nurse, so there's a lot of things under my independent license that we can do. So I'm trying to balance, because we found all these needs through one thing, and then we can help them through the other thing. We just have to be very careful on which end of our business and our organization we're talking about and what we can do.
Thank you, and then I saw your hand, and then we'll get back to a couple more questions.
Thanks. Yeah, I have 2 questions, and I'm so grateful for all of this information and the work that you're bringing to our community. I'm very curious about the interests and politics behind the moratorium on starting healthcare co-ops.
So we.
Yeah, and I'm also really curious about if there's anything visual, a timeline, or something visual that shows where you started and where you're going. And I work with kids in schools, and I know that this would be an incredible visual for them to see, to visualize themselves working in their own communities as they get older and get educated. So I just would love to see something visual with a timeline. And
Joanna will get that to you.
Actually, I was gonna say we have one. If you guys don't mind, I'll start that answer and then please take over. So I love this question because it was gonna go into my next question. So what we didn't do is give you like the individual history of how we got to this part. So I will collapse that very quickly in my language and then let them, of course, tell their own story. But I'm involved in both stories, and that's why I want to say just a little bit. So if it's okay with Joanna, I used to serve on the board of a BIPA like many years ago. I think I started 10 years ago. And at that time, it was brought up by that board configuration that it was the mission of, really in the spirit of Dr. Blair's legacy, to create social enterprises, that wasn't the word that we used at the time, that would sustain the overall mission of the BIPA. And so, of course, you serve your time on a board, you move on, but I never forgot that. This is why the layers are important, and this is the piece that I want to elevate, because I made a promise to myself when I was on that board that it didn't matter how long it took me as a neighbor, as a community member, as a trusted friend to deliver on my part of that promise, but I would do it. And so this is just the BIPA side of the story. So hence, was it 2 years ago, Jane? Jane went to the National Home Care Cooperative Conference and came back. And she was like, Kimberly, Jane's my road dog. We are tough buddies. And she's like, Kimberly, let's start a home care co-op. And it was in that moment, every promise that I made to myself about a BIPA came into the room. And I shared my dream and my heart with Jane, and the person who she is. She was like, of course, let's go talk to Abibba. And so that's exactly what we did, was we took her knowledge that she gained from the Home Care Cooperative community and the mission of Abibba and what they already do, and we put them together, asking Joanna and Kathy in a quiet meeting if it felt right to them. And that's how Everyday Details journey actually started that day, but it started years before. And then secondarily, I used to own my own companies, and I don't know, Anthony, how many years ago it was, but he was running the labor crew at Go, and at some point, he had asked me, because I was doing business consulting and helping businesses grow and scale, I need you to put in a bid for training some of our folks in how to do business. And so I did, and I didn't win the bid, or something came up or it didn't go through, but it was at that moment, our missions aligned in terms of how we empower people who are not just thinking about getting employable work, but also wanting to go beyond the work and into ownership. We kind of just kept putting our heads together around it until eventually Upstaff, for many people and many visionaries, was born. But I'm not saying he and I were the ones who started it, but it was kind of this light bulb moment that happened where we just kept putting it in the atmosphere. So take it away, you guys.
Yeah, well, the continuation of the story, we get back to the telephone that was lost. Because I think that was the first house that we went into. Caucasian elderly couple owned their own home, and when we walked in, there was 6 cats that had never been outside. Yeah, and I can't, it's a long story, and I looked around as a nurse and I'm thinking, I'm like, I can't get to the diabetes and all her other medical problems if we can't tackle this. And so so later on, we kind of had a meeting, and I said, I can't really ask you guys to do this, but would you guys be willing, if they will allow us, to try to clean this in some kind of way so that we can address their health issues, because I can't believe that they're living like this. And they said, yeah, we'll do whatever needs to be done, whatever you want to do. And so we spent some time attempting to do that. And from that moment then we heard and talked to them, and it was kind of like God, it was like, it just came together. That whatever our needs and what they were offering, to help us with, and it kind of all came together. And then, heard the rest of the story.
For me, Kimberly is correct. For any of those of you that know me, I'm a balloon floater. It's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, and I just let that balloon go. Kimberly is just that much. Can't do that. It's not about that. And so, for Upstaff, and while I was running the labor crew, as I mentioned, Green Opportunities is known for doing construction and culinary. And what I ultimately always found is that we would have folks that would come into our office that weren't interested in culinary and construction, but they wanted jobs. And also, construction is really, really tough. And so even though I would continue to build relationships with construction companies, I always knew that really wasn't long-term sustainable employment for some of the folks that we were having come through our doors. We'd have a project, something would be going on in Asheville, but after that project was done, now it was like, now what for this particular individual? Now we've got to find them another job. And so that job might be 1 week, it might be 2 weeks. And for me, that was hard for them, and it was hard for me to watch, because now they got a little taste of, they were making money and they were getting that in their pocket, but now that 2 weeks was over, and it was like, okay, so how can we address this? And I couldn't sleep at night just knowing that. And so, in my mind, it was always, how could we, and this was the admissions part of me from working here at UNCA, how could we, one of the questions that I would always ask my students when they came to UNCA is, they'd come in with one major, and ultimately they would always leave out as another major. And so I always, on the front end, would ask them, what is it that you really, really want to do? And so when I would have folks come through our doors at Green Opportunities, most of the time they would come in here, I need a job. And it's like, I understand that, but ultimately, if you could have any job in the world, what would that actually be? And so I would get a better sense for what they really had a passion for or was interested in. And construction and culinary was just a very narrow walkway for them. So that's kind of like what was the engine behind Upstaff, is what are some of the other industries that we could go into that, one, was not seasonal, and two, wasn't so short term. And so we began to really flip that model and start looking at bigger organizations that could absorb more students, actually, and also put folks on a potential career track. So maybe they start out in the laundry department, but through our support, which is another piece that kind of melds the two organizations together, because, and it's also the USP, or the unique selling proposition that we give to employers. A lot of temp staffing agencies just churn through people. They send somebody over to an employer, it doesn't work out, send me another one. And my value proposition to them is, no, let's sit down and figure out what's really going on with the employee. Maybe it's something personal that they don't really want to share with you, and maybe we can fix this, and therefore you can have retention as opposed to getting another one of our folks. And for the employers that have bought into that, that's really worked out for us. But ultimately, what we wanted to do is provide a bigger breadth or a larger breadth of potential opportunities for folks who were looking for employment. And we've been able to do that through Upstaff, where that kind of, goal was kind of just, Go is still in that niche of doing their culinary construction. And so we can absorb students that come through that, because we can also do those placements, but we can also offer opportunities for folks who come through the door that didn't necessarily come through our training programs, or didn't necessarily have to go through our training programs, because there are a lot of folks in our communities that are underemployed as well. So.
I'm gonna ask, it's great transition into one of the questions, Anthony. So what is and if everybody would answer, that'd be great, what is your unique selling proposition in the marketplace, through your social or cooperative enterprise? What makes you valuable in saving people money and increasing their bottom line, the things that people wanna hear? We've given you guys a lot of the background and social piece, but these are businesses and they're rocking it out, slowly but surely. So what is it? What are the unique selling propositions, the unique value proposition?
As I mentioned earlier, for us, and for me, just being an entrepreneur and working in business, retention is much cheaper than attrition. And so one of the things that we go in talking with a lot of our employers is, how can we retain this employer? And a lot of times what it boils down is to communication. So believe it or not, I've been able to get a lot of the folks that we work with that are at the decision maker levels to commit to is that no action takes place without all three of us sitting at the table. When I say all three of us, it's the manager or the supervisor or whoever that is, the employee, and myself or somebody that's on my staff. And let's really sit down and figure out what's really going on with the employee before we take any type of disciplinary action. The other part is, as I mentioned, if the student is having problems with transportation, through our relationship with Green Opportunities, we're able to get them a bus pass so we can alleviate that. Our unique selling proposition is, let us handle all of those things that you all shouldn't have to worry about, and let us wrap our support around the employee, which will allow someone to come into work and not have to worry about some of those barriers they might have about getting to work or finding childcare or whatever it might be, paying probation fees, whatever it might be. We'll handle that on our end, but at the end of the day, if something does come up, we're all sitting at the table and figuring out how can we keep this employee on track. And so most of our employers that we've been working with have signed on and committed to that, and that's a value to them, and it's a value to their bottom line as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Why not? Well, while they're thinking, we'll get a question. Is that okay, you guys? Go ahead.
It'd be great to know who these employees were so that we can,
Employers.
so that we can support their business also.
Well, I don't know if they want to put all that out there right now, but.
I will say one of our first employers when we started this endeavor, well, they weren't the first, but they were our second. Housing, we've always partnered with the Housing Authority, and we've worked with the housing residents to get them employment, and we've done that But our first, I guess, commercial client was really Biltmore Farms, which has 5 local hotels here. Robert Foster has been amazing in terms of helping us kind of work through some of the challenges that some of our folks that go over there and work, and being committed to helping us hold managers or supervisors or whatever it may be accountable for behaviors. They don't just want to call us with bad news, they also want feedback from us and from our employees about how they can do a better job in terms of keeping their employees. And so he's been absolutely fabulous and amazing and all kinds of things.
Yeah, and I want to give them a plug too, just because when I owned my first business, Biltmore Farms was a client of mine and a very good client, and I know the inner workings of kind of how they think about contracting and employing a diverse people, and you wouldn't know it on the surface, but I'm proud to say that I had a very good relationship with them, and have seen the relationship that Anthony's built with them as well.
And then the other piece to that, I'll just say this real quick, is unlike other temp agencies where their model is to keep somebody temp for as long as they possibly can so they can continue to generate that revenue, for us, there is a certain amount of time, just because at the end of the day we are a business, but it is very minimal in comparison to other temp agencies that are out here in the community. Our goal is temp to perm. If you like them and everything works out, it's 90 days, which is a probationary period for any other job that you might go into. If you like them, please hire them. And so, because we've got plenty to come behind them. So, as long as we are able to keep the client or our customer, which is the community, doing their part. We've already got 2 over at Biltmore Farms right now that they're ready to go ahead and hire permanently, which will give them an increase in their pay and also give them the benefits. And I just think Biltmore Farms is just a great organization if that's what you're into.
Okay, thank you for that question. Team?
So, personal leadership history. Being a nurse, number one, you can be a nurse by profession, or you can be a nurse by heart. And I like to think, fortunately, I'm a nurse by profession and with heart. So, but my biggest skills is assessment skills, and being able to make a plan and implement it, and my personal skill of determination, which I think everybody that knows me in here will attest to. See a lot of smiles. I am extremely determined. So if I tell you I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. And it doesn't matter how many times I gotta change the plan, renegotiate the plan, find more people, whatever it is, I'm gonna do it. So, I bring that to the table, and sometimes I don't know if I'm too determined, y'all have to decide that. But I like to think that if I start something, that it's gonna get finished, and being a nurse, that's a good quality to have. And, so I bring that to the table. And these girls bring a lot to the table too, but one of the things I think that they will say that we bring is trust, compassion, and passion. And that's a group personal thing that I know we have, and I'll let them tell you their own personal.
I know myself, I've been a CNA 1 and 2 for like 18, 19 years. I just renewed my CNA license last year to up my game a little bit. I'm also a former, I am a business owner, but I also work in the community. I work with public housing, as well as I talk out in the community with WNC. So I have a heart for people. I have a ministries of helps. And so with all of that, that's what I bring to the table, because I just love helping people.
Well, like I said earlier, I've never owned a business. This is actually my first business ownership experience. However, I have been a mom for 18 years and a wife for 18 years. And I've been a nursing assistant also for 20 years. So I bring to the table, I think, a passion to care for others, to meet their needs, sure that they are experiencing life on a level where they can function, and if not, getting them in a environment where they can do that. And so, that's what I bring.
And I will say too, Yvette and I both are students, we both are in school. She's in school for nursing, I'm in school for social work.
I have one more question for the group, but I'd like to hear any questions from you guys before I ask it. Anybody else? No, baby. All right. Our last question is, what unseen resources, after this question, I'm gonna ask Jane Hatley to come up and close us. What unseen resources are needed to uphold a viable ecosystem for African American business owners? I know you guys don't see yourself as experts, none of us do, but you are part of the ecosystem and part of the answer.
I'll say number one would be funding. Funding.
And this is a good time for the statistics that I brought. Because I think that when people get a vision of the neighborhood, because we're all community, and then you break those down into different parts of the community. And I like for people, whatever community, that gets me back to my skills. The first thing I always do, and Delana will attest to this, if you give me a problem, the first thing I'm gonna run out and do is I'm gonna research it. I gotta know, who am I talking about? Who am I talking to? Who am I gonna be doing this for? So I try to look, and basically, depending on which source, the city has 89,000 individuals. The African American population is around 11,000. So I want you to think about this in the source of power, resources, and that visibility piece you were talking about. 11,000 people out of 89,000. Can you see the problem there? So if you're trying to, you're trying to run your own business or start a business and you're an African American in this town, not only do you need funding, you need people to come and be a part of that. And look at African American businesses as something that you would contribute to, go to, if it's a restaurant, whatever it may be, if you're not out there to support. Because if you're talking about 11,000 people, you're only, how many adults are you talking about? So if you just basically just split that in half, can you see that we cannot survive without you? We can't do anything. So if you see, where's the black businesses and where's the black people, when you're talking about Asheville, then you know with what I just told you, that there can't be any black businesses that are sustainable, unless it's our barbershops, the things that all of us African Americans are gonna go to. We're gonna make sure we got a hairnet. Right? The undertakers, everybody gotta die, right? So those kind of businesses that are by nature are gonna be sustainable. But I know that there's more out there for us than that. And to make that happen, we need all of you.
I want to acknowledge Jim Pitts in the room with BIPA, he's the board chair.
Hey, Dr. Pitt.
And I want to see if there's any more questions before we close, because I want to bring up one of our core partners here. Go ahead.
Can I just say something? And I want to speak to what Ms. Avery was talking about. One of the things that I think is really important, and especially here in Asheville, is having safe spaces. Whether we want to admit it or not, Asheville is very segregated. And what I like to encourage the folks that I work with, and what I like to do is to provide opportunities. And it's always been a mission of green opportunities. And anybody that knows Dwayne Barton, Dwayne has always believed that he always takes one of our students or one of the clients that we're working with to any meeting that he might go to, just so that they have that exposure. Nothing happens in Asheville without knowing somebody. And it took me a long time to figure it, well, actually didn't take me a long time to figure it out. But you just don't, you can't do a whole lot, kind of staying in your own little world. You have to kind of get out and meet people and have these opportunities where you can get in. And when you're talking about unseen resources, resources. As I said, when I started my new construction cleanup business, I didn't know what my micro enterprise was. But when I initially was trying to conceive the idea, I went to talk to, I went to look for African-American men who were running janitorial companies, because that's initially what I wanted to do. I'd come back to Asheville, I hadn't been into IT for a long time, and there were no IT jobs here, so I was like, well, shoot, I'm gonna start my own business. And in high school, I used to run a janitorial company. And so I went to talk to a couple of the, what we would coin old heads about janitorial business, and none of them wanted to talk to me. Obviously, they didn't want to give up trade secrets or whatever it was. So I ended up over at Mountain Micro Enterprise, and that was like my first introduction into the business community in Asheville, because when I was here at the university, I was in this lovely little bubble, and I had all these mentors like Dr. Pitts and Dr. Mullen, and I was safe over here. And I'm not an Asheville native, so again, you know, it really goes back to who you know. So that was really my entree going through that particular program, that I began to meet folks and kind of get into that business world. And for those of you who know me, I never met a stranger now. I can go in any area of Asheville and feel comfortable, and that's what I try to encourage the folks that I work with as well. The two folks that I was talking to yesterday about how they can buy a house, I made sure that they go meet Robert Foster. They know Robert Foster. He's the general manager, but you need to know him and have a conversation with him, and just keep encouraging that type of thing, because if you stay just over in the community that we know, then there's no growth. And so for me, that's an resource, is just getting them out there and going into those spaces that aren't always comfortable for us, because we're not used to them. So.
Not just not comfortable, but dark places, right? So
And sometimes not welcome. You
Yeah.
began to be quite honest.
Can I just
Yes.
ask one quick question?
Yes.
You talked a lot about the physical needs of people. Can you address the mental health concerns that you see? And then secondly, in that environment, there's a beatdown effect that happens. How you address that, and how you address the negative cycle that continues if that's not addressed.
Mental, okay.
Okay, so I also want to remind you that we're at our time, so if you could give an answer to that, and then we'll close. Thank
Okay,
you.
so one of the things that we do, and that was on the last point I wanted to make, is the social determinants of health. What everybody nationally and locally looks at, which addresses discrimination, the person's health, all of that. So I'll leave this out on our table outside, where you can get our everyday details information as well. So I want people to know what the social determinants of health is, so we're all on the same page. So I hope everyone will pick this up. But the mental piece, that is so huge. People that have gone through trauma, we look at that, we address that, and everybody in the community, healthcare wise, is looking at that on some level. Are they getting deep enough to actually make a change? That's something else that I'm working on, to make sure that all the mental health issues that we found, that everyday details definitely is trying to address, that everybody knows what it is, and covers that, so we're all on the same page. So just stay tuned.
I'm really honored to close this out. I just wanted to say two quick things, and they're both plugs. One is that the county and the city have just approved a fund called the Mountain Community Capital Fund that is intended to help businesses, particularly businesses owned by people of color, get started by providing the critical collateral piece. It's a loan guarantee fund. But the second thing I want to say is that these folks here inspire me every day to do the work that we do. They are heart in action in Asheville. But they can't survive. I want to just make sure y'all get that connection. They can't keep going unless the connection is made, so that if you have an elderly person in your family that needs care, you connect with them. That you take the brochure and you pass the word around, because if as a community we don't support them, then we won't have these amazing women doing the work they do, and men, sorry, we have men in the co-op as well. And both of these organizations, what is critically different about them from other businesses is that at the heart of both of these is people, is the need to serve people in our community and to keep that foremost in our minds. So I'm sorry I had to say that plug, but please support these businesses. Hire Anthony's folks if you have a need. Hire a BIPA to take care of your elderly. Everyday details, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. And on behalf of UNCA, Mountain Biz who sponsored this particular session, and of course, each and every one of you, we're neighbors, y'all. We're neighbors. We care about each other. I want to thank my friends and business owners. Anthony, Jennifer, Kathy, Yvette, JJ, Earl, JoJo, who aren't here, Joanna, Angelique, and we just want to say thank you for having us today.
We want to thank you.
I have a very quick announcement before everybody breaks. If you're joining us for brunch, the brunch is down on the arena floor. You may walk down the steps, the arena steps to get there, but if you have any concerns about steps, especially steps that move, we have volunteers that will help direct you to an elevator so that you can go down more safely. So just watch for the elevators out on the concourse. Thank you.